I'd like to welcome Art Lee on this morning from the University of Minnesota, and we're going to talk a good bit about some of the early years of the American College of Sports Medicine and Art's direct involvement with the college over the years. So I appreciate you coming by for a chat. And so you were saying that the first meeting for you was
1969 in Atlanta.
Okay. So you had your MD degree then?
Oh yes, yeah. I had I had finished a 6-year tour active duty after I had gotten my training in cardiology at the University of Miami.
Okay.
And I served 3 years in Europe, and I was stationed at Walter Reed for 3 years, and then I was at the New Jersey College of Medicine, Newark Beth Israel Medical Center. And I began doing research on coronary circulation in animals with Donald Gregg, who was one of the world's great cardiovascular physiologists. So
that's what I was going to ask you, how you made the jump to the American College of Sports Medicine. So it was through some of this research then on
Yes, and I got into this research because I have had a lifelong interest in being fit, essentially.
Okay.
I ran lettered in high school and track and cross country, and first 2 years of college.
Where did you go to high school and college?
I grew up in Miami, and I went to the University of Florida undergraduate, and went to the University of Wisconsin for graduate work and medical school.
Okay. Did you go straight into medical school then, or did you do some other graduate?
Well, I had a mixed program before there was such a thing. So I got my master's degree and a year of medical school done in 2 years at Madison.
Who was there then? Was Larson there, Leonard Larson at Wisconsin at the time? And
right.
Was Balke there?
Yes, but I didn't have much involvement with
because they were in physical education.
Right, yeah. I was in biochemistry and medicine.
I see.
And I was a house fellow in the undergraduate dorms and started doing research on heart valves and got me interested in cardiology.
Okay. And so have you, did you have a private practice at all?
No. After I completed 6 years of active duty in the Army, I ran a research unit, a clinical research unit at Newark Beth Israel Medical Center, part of New Jersey College of Medicine in Newark.
Yeah.
And I was there for 6 years before being recruited at the University of Minnesota in '73.
Oh, I was just going to ask.
Right.
So since '73, you've been in Minnesota. Right. Okay. And tell me a little bit about the. So, 1969, you go to the first ACSM meeting. At the time, there probably weren't that many MDs involved.
No.
With the college.
I think Bruno Balke was an MD in Germany, and Sam Fox.
He was a cardiologist.
Cardiologist,
too.
right? Yeah. He was president both of ACSM and the American College of Cardiology. And there weren't many people in the orthopedic area, the physical medicine area.
Not at that time.
No.
Here, that's true.
And there was only about 300 people at the meeting in Atlanta. And the first couple meetings I presented some of our animal work.
So your research was on animal models, dogs at first?
Well, both dogs and I worked with Colin Bloor, who subsequently was professor at La Jolla at the University of California, San Diego. And our specific area was studying rats, exercise rats, coronary circulation of heart, about every organ we studied.
Right. Well, what was some of the first things you started to do when you joined the College of Sports Medicine? Were you on some committees and all those sorts of things?
That's correct. In '75, I was in the first group that got certified as program director.
Which was a pretty hard test, I'm told.
Well, Mike Pollock, Phil Wilson, and I were on the student list, and Bill Haskell, Bruno Balke, and Sam Fox, and Buzzkirk, Ellsworth Buzzkirk, and it was in Happy Valley in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, at Penn State.
Yeah, and they gave us a 3-day course, and after the first day, Bruno Balke saw that a lot of people weren't serious, and he got up and he said, "You are not taking this seriously, and you don't realize, but not all of you are going to pass." And at that point, we lost about 25% of the student body. And Mike Pollock said, "Art, what would Henry Blackburn say if you flunked?" And so I went to Buzzkirk, who has got his PhD at the University of Minnesota, and I got some anatomy books. And so Mike Pollock was one of my best friends ever. And I decided we'll study at 10 o'clock and then we'll go to the bar and then relax.
Right.
we won't do an all-nighter.
So you passed.
You passed, yeah. So,
and that was in 75?
75, yeah.
And you were?
Number 29.
Number 29.
I think there were 35 that stuck it out.
Wow. Now, did you know any of the early cardiologists in the college, Bishop or Wolf, or?
No.
Most of those had passed on?
Yeah, we had a meeting in Philadelphia where Wolf's family was there, his son, I don't remember.
Okay. And so Buzzkirk did his degree at
With,
Minnesota with Henry Taylor.
Henry Taylor, right? Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm the first Henry Taylor professor.
I noticed that on your card. I was going to ask you about that. Well, that's quite an honor. I mean,
yes,
that's
and
wonderful.
restarted the Laboratory of Physiological Hygiene that got dissolved into the Division of Epidemiology at the university. And when we moved out, the stadium was later torn down. We had our original laboratories in the stadium.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So the stadium was torn down, and now we have a recreation center where the stadium is, and our laboratory is in the basement of the recreation center. And it used to be at gate 27, and now we had it numbered out of order. Where's room 27?
Oh.
Where the stadium used to be.
That's neat.
So it's a lot like Madison, where the ACSM was.
Yeah, they were in the stadium too.
Right.
Yeah. So what department are you with there now? Is it kinesiology?
I'm
or
with
what?
kinesiology. I was recruited for the School of Public Health and what was a laboratory of physiological hygiene, which then merged with epidemiology. And then when we had an opportunity to build a new lab and to get an endowed professorship, I moved my primary affiliation over, but still affiliation with the School of Public Health and the medical school.
Do you get to work with graduate students?
Yes.
And, any medical students, or where is the medical school? Is it
Medical schools in the same area across the street from us, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But mostly graduate students?
Mostly
then in your
graduate
lab?
students. I just finished 3 years as director of graduate studies in the kinesiology department.
Okay.
And most of my PhD students wind up as professors. I get a select few.
Yeah, well, that's rewarding.
Yeah, Steve Gaskell told me he's now made full professor at Montana. He finished about 5 years ago.
That's
with
wonderful.
me. And he was involved with Heritage Family Study.
Oh, yeah.
Data set, yeah.
Tell me a little bit, maybe a lot, about some of those early discussions that you had with Paffenbarger and Jeremy Morris, and I mean that's some very, very interesting, groundbreaking research in the 70s, I guess.
Yeah. I wrote paper with Henry Blackburn in the 70s on the relationship associations from epidemiologic studies on physical activity and heart disease. And PAF was just beginning to publish at that time. And I first met him at a cardiovascular, American Heart Association cardiovascular epidemiology meeting in Tampa. And he and Steve Blair and I were happy joggers. And we subsequently kept in touch and were also regular invitees to the University of Kuopio's a conference they have called Puyo Conference. Puyo is a mile-high mountain in the middle of the city where they ski jump.
This is in Sweden?
And it's in Finland.
Finland.
Kuopio, Finland.
I see. Okay.
Rainer Ramama is the director of the Institute of Exercise Medicine, and he was a postdoc with me, and was co-author of my paper that I was first author on physical activity in high-risk men in the multiple risk factor intervention trial.
When would that have been, Art?
The first paper was in JAMA in 1987.
Okay.
We published, which was considered a landmark paper.
Oh, yeah.
Then I had that was a 7-year follow-up, and we published 11-year follow-up and 16-year follow-up. So that got me on the map with Jerry and PAF. And Steve, and we were all of us involved with the joints, CDC and prevention and ACSM guidelines, and Bill Haskell and I and Steve Blair were involved with the first Surgeon General's report.
Yeah, those are all groundbreaking things.
Yeah, and the NIH Consensus Conference, I was asked to gather the papers, and I was the editor of the book on the NIH Consensus Conference on physical activity and cardiovascular health. Human Kinetics published it.
Yeah.
1995.
Wow. I've always wondered about sort of the jogging movement, and I've done a little bit of looking into it, and Bill Bowerman and the cardiologist that he worked with in Portland, and I just wondered from your standpoint, living it, through that, how important you think that was,
well,
as far as the physical activity,
well,
and heart health.
I was a runner for 60 years, and when as I mentioned, I ran cross country in high school and college, and I used to do it either late at night or early morning, and this was the 50s.
And before the jogging movement.
Yeah, and I was in my senior year, before starting at the University of Florida, I was running 10 miles a night after work in a high school field. And I remember the police coming because I think it was because of the house right alongside, and I guess they kept seeing this guy pass every minute or two by their window, and this police car pulls up and begins floodlighting the track. And I'm just in shorts, and I think I was running barefooted, no shirt, and I took one lap with the floodlight on me, and the second lap, the guy with one hand on his holster and one hand on flashlight was in my face. He started jogging alongside. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "Getting in shape." Oh, he clicked off his light. I guess no law against that.
Seems reasonable. Wow.
So, yeah, I think
things have changed.
Yeah, it was unusual to see somebody running.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit more about Blackburn and Taylor, and I mean, that's quite an early group.
Yeah,
you
but
know.
Taylor and Blackburn were down the last two faculty members of the original Laboratory of Physiological Hygiene,
And
which
they were
was
both
started
at
by Ansel
Minnesota.
Keys. Yes,
Yeah.
right. Taylor was Ansel Keys' first PhD student, and they came with him from Harvard. You know,
I was going to
Harvard
say
Fatigue Lab.
because he was
connection.
at the Harvard Fatigue Lab.
Yeah,
so-
Buskirk wrote that nice article as part of the Wolf Lecture.
Yeah, that was good.
Yeah, Keys to Our Past, the Laboratory of Physiological Hygiene, Keys to Our Past.
Yeah. And now you've restarted it, basically.
Yeah, we call it the Laboratory of Physiological Hygiene and Exercise Science because we merged with the Exercise Science Laboratory of Kinesiology.
How many people do you have in that lab, Art? Are active?
Well, we have 5 faculty members that are in exercise science area, and they're all doing their own thing. The projects that I'm working on primarily have to do with exercise and peripheral artery disease. We're just starting to get into exercise and cognitive function. I have a junior faculty member that's doing pilot work in that area, and we just got major NIH grant to continue our peripheral artery disease study that is showing that upper arm exercise improves walking ability in people who have poor circulation in their legs and get pain in the legs. And
So those machines that you do this
that's
with
Monarch, that's right.
Are valuable.
Yes, we use the Monarch Swedish upside down cycle.
I see those in the gym, and
They have some here.
I
on
never
these.
see anyone using them. So
Right.
what you're finding is that people should use them more.
Well, it's particularly good for these people who have difficulty walking.
True.
Because it improves their walking ability, and they get exercise without pain. The traditional route is to walk until you get pain and rest and then continue on.
I see.
And that is shown to improve your ability to move around, but
Yeah.
we're not sure why the arm exercise has this cross-training effect on the legs.
Has anyone looked at that much in the past?
No. Well, we just finished American Heart pilot study, and we're going to start in July a major NIH grant in that area and try to look at mechanisms.
Try to find out why.
My latest PhD student just finished to use the pilot data for his dissertation, and he just got an assistant professorship, and it's going to continue on the project for next 5 years.
Oh, fantastic. I wondered about some of the other things looking back at the college and what has happened and transpired and sort of your take on things.
Yeah, that's really been amazing how it's expanded. I think we had only about 300 people in Atlanta, and and as you mentioned, we had a shortage of MDs.
Yeah.
It's such a shortage. I think I ran for vice president in the early '80s, and I got elected, and I had previously been on the board trustees. And I got elected, and then I got a call and said, will you run for vice president? I said, wait, don't you know I'm already vice president?
Yeah.
And he said, no, we want you to run for re-election. I think it was because they had a shortage of MDs. Wanted to have some MD on the officers or the board.
Yeah, it seemed to me that
Yes.
the early years were really right down your alley. I mean, the emphasis was on fitness and
Right.
and heart health, and you know, we've sort of moved into other things now.
That's right. And
I think the cardiology presence was very, very strong.
yeah, we would, particularly Sam Fox
Yeah.
leadership at that time.
And the fitness, the whole fitness movement.
The wellness movement.
Yeah, starting in the 60s or so.
I think the multiple risk factor intervention trial, it educated a whole group of individuals on health promotion and going after the risk factors, anti-smoking,
Yes.
diet changes.
Yeah.
Although physical activity was not part of it. It was verboten, really, to encourage people to exercise.
I know.
Except perhaps at South Carolina, because South Carolina had was the only one of the 22 centers that was not in a medical setting. It was in the physical education department.
Oh.
So I think they had a fitness center right next to the Mr. Fit Center. So
Was Russ Pate there
Russ
then?
Pate and Steve Blair were
Yeah.
co-investigators.
I see. Okay. So Steve Blair was there before he went to Cooper?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
And now he's back. Okay.
Made the round.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Be darned.
Yeah, and that study, we thought that was going to be the major emphasis on how to. We thought we could wipe out coronary disease by getting people to stop smoking, controlling their blood pressure. We bring them in every week, give them pile up the medications, and to lower their cholesterol. We just were limited to diet at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And then the most successful modality was getting them to stop smoking. And when you stop smoking, you gain weight, and that was not on the radar screen. Weight as a risk factor.
Mm-hmm.
So they began gaining weight, and their cholesterol wasn't coming down. They needed a lot of medication to lower their blood pressure. In fact, that turned out to be literally a killer, the overdosing with the thiazide diuretics.
Oh, to lower the blood pressure.
Yeah, we had the safety and monitoring board blew the whistle. And at that time, the protocol was to use single drugs to their maximal level before you go on to the next. Now we add drugs early, and when you push thiazides to the maximal level, it raises cholesterol. We showed that on the feeding study, and it also raises uric acid and increases sympathetic activity, and we were getting a lot of sudden deaths. So obesity was also a problem on cholesterol and blood pressure control. And the assessments, we had tight dietary control, trying to encourage them to markedly reduce essentially fats in their diet.
Yeah.
And they weren't overeating, the dietitians were telling us. And then we were using the Taylor questionnaire, the Minnesota questionnaire, and all 22 centers to assess physical activity. And what we found was that they were so sedentary. Only 5% were joggers or regular exercisers. So it wasn't their overeating. They were just so sedentary. And the fact that we said we don't care if you gain weight when you stop smoking.
There was no more incentive.
Yeah,
then.
so Steve and I and some of the others were saying we got to work physical activity into it for obesity sake. Ogilvy Paul, who was the overall chairman, Jerry Stamler, Henry Blackburn, who had worked on the protocol. They didn't want the protocol tampered with. And I mentioned the Paffenbarger thing. We had this emergency meeting as part of the cardiovascular epidemiology sessions in Tampa in I think it was the early 80s, to get something on physical activity, to at least tell them, walk more or something.
Yeah.
And we found Steve and I got caught in the middle. The hardliners didn't want to tamper the protocol at all. And then our exercise friends who were working on the secondary prevention trial, the heart exercise study. Herman Hellerstein was one of the leaders. They didn't want physical activity contaminating Mr. Fit because they wanted their own trial, exercise primary prevention trial. So they were arguing against us, inserting it. So Steve and I were in the middle.
Way,
yeah, and finally, Henry Blackburn had an injured back and from playing tennis with his kids, and he went to the meeting because he wanted to make sure we didn't change the protocol, and he referred to the fact that exercise can be dangerous to your health, as he knew. So
and he was an example of
it. So what was finally decided was if a person was overweight and they had a negative stress test, we did stress tests on all the subjects, and some centers did it every year, like Minnesota and New Jersey College of Medicine. Most of them just did it at the beginning of the study. So they had negative stress test and they were overweight. Then you could tell them to take a walk, and there were special forms filled out to sign off on it. It was ridiculous.
just to walk.
And that was one of the reasons why there wasn't much difference between the control group and our intervention group.
Yeah.
Because the obesity thing wiped out the diet and the necessity to use high doses of medications was a killer, literally.
Yeah.
And so it.
Now, what were the years that was going on?
I was recruited from Minnesota in '73, and the study started in '74.
And this was in
80.
South Carolina?
No, there were 22 clinical centers in the United States. And
that's right.
And the coordinating center was at the University of Minnesota in the biostatistics department.
Okay.
And so we had access to the data for the follow-ups. And we did manage to get all the centers to, at the beginning of the protocol to use the Minnesota questionnaire. So we had a rich data set.
And they were all funded by NIH?
Yes, it was. It was the largest study at the time ever funded by NIH.
And what was it called?
The Multiple Risk Factor Intervention Trial, or MRFIT, or Mr. Fit, which is a terrible acronym because these guys were very fit.
Yeah, when you
they
said
say
that
5%
earlier,
joggers.
I didn't recognize it.
Yeah, only 500 out of the 12,000 exercise regularly.
Wow.
And they were selected because they had combinations of high cholesterol, but not high enough that they require medications and high blood pressure, and that we could take care of because we had hypertension clinics with drugs and smoking. And based on the Framingham logistic equation, they were at the upper 10 to 15% risk for a heart attack in 7 years.
Were these all men?
Yes, there were men 35 to 59.
Okay.
57.
Okay. So I was just wondering, again, going back to your lab at Minnesota, how many students do you normally have with the faculty?
We have a very large undergraduate group. We have about 60 graduate students and about over 300 undergraduates.
So they would be majors in the department then?
Yeah, most of them go on to some kind of health-related careers. We get a lot of them go into physical therapy. It's a handful, medical school, nursing school.
That sounds like a nice program.
I have several that are MDs or jumped from kinesiology, either after finishing their degree, undergrad, or got a master's at least, and then got into medical school. Yeah, most of them went from master's degree to medical school.
So
Yeah.
thanks so much for
My pleasure.
sharing some of these remembrances with us and talking about the earlier years of ACSM and your career. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jack.